No, I'm not used to public speaking, and you'll soon find that out. But I have a few guidelines here, and I'll try and stick with them. And as my wife will tell you, my voice usually fades, so don't hesitate to tell me. I guess we start at the beginning. Before I do, there was a young fellow that just walked in a while ago, and him and I were kids together all the way up from when I first came to this country. George Gallagher. Boy, George, it's really something to see you here. Yeah. At the beginning, I was born in Belfast, Ireland, January 2nd, 1922, and we came over and we settled in Burholm. In those days, your father had to come over and have a job for 2 years before he could bring you into the country. It's not like today, you just walk in, you know. Our religion was non-sectarian. My mother's church was in a regular home. We had preachers travel around, so I really wasn't, I guess I could have been a conscientious objector if I wanted to, but I didn't. Went to Crossan School, elementary, Woodrow Wilson Junior High in Olney, and after the war I went to Pennsylvania Institute of Criminology. I have here the reason for selecting the paratroops. I did have a pilot's license, and I even had a horse, and rode a motorcycle, and had an old Packard car, so I guess I'd done about everything there was in those days. When I went down, I tried to join in, first I tried to get in the Royal Air Force, Royal Canadian Air Force. And I was all set to go, and Pearl Harbor got hit. And I had the letter, I meant to bring it, but I didn't, where we were no longer accepting American citizens in the Royal Canadian Air Force. So I got a little perturbed, and I wanted to join the Naval Air Force, but I had to have a college education, so that was out. So I went down and took a test for Army Air Force at that time, and they wanted me to be a bombardier, which I couldn't handle, because my mother told me about her sisters being killed during the war when the German Zeppelins bombed gas, so that was out of the question. So if I couldn't fly them, I was going to ride them. So I went down and joined the paratroops. And they told you if you're Irish and land on your head, you never got hurt. Boy, did they lie. Yeah. So the first, after enlisting, my brother, by the way, he was one of the first enlistees. He's 5 years older. And almost a year later, I enlisted. His Social Security, his Army serial number was 1311-51-51, and mine was 1311-51-57, which meant in that whole draft board, there was only 16 enlistees in a whole year. A little hard to take. The first thing we've done, we went to New Cumberland, and the first weekend they say, you're on a detail, you know. So this young fellow is on a detail, and the heater is a big hopper, so he shovels all the coal in, and he figures I'm going to get it all done at one time. And we went back and opened the doors, the oxygen hit the gas, and the doors blew up and hit him across the chest. So first weekend, there goes a guy away in what we call the hash wagon, you know, so what a start. So the next thing, we proceeded with two other fellows, Henry J. Barron, and another fellow, right at this minute, I forget his name, and we proceeded to a place called Toccoa, Georgia. And the mountain at Toccoa is called Mount Curry, and that Indian means we stand alone. So we were assigned to a W company until the regiment was formed. So W company was nothing but mud, a big mud flat. And we learned fast, if you get in your cot, by the time you come back to see it again, the mattress is all the way up to the mud. So we went to the mess hall, we got tomato cans, turn them upside down, put your legs of the cots on the tomato cans, keep them from sinking in the mud. So you learn to survive real quick. And there's one fellow here I'll introduce later, he can vouch for some of the things I'm saying. We had no TO, so we didn't have much food. So all we got for breakfast was raisins and chocolate, and I mean black chocolate. And to this day, I'm not too keen on chocolate, and I don't like raisins too much either. But we're outside of the mess. I have to keep going fast here because there's so much to cover, if you'll excuse me. But outside, you're in the mess hall, and everybody's hungry, and everybody's mean, and they're told they're the toughest guys in the world, so we're all in line trying to get in the mess hall, and somebody discovers all along the mess hall big bushel baskets of potatoes. So they figure, hey, we throw a potato up on the rope, come down and hit a guy, and he'll hit the guy behind him, and they'll go out and fight, and then we'll move up in line, see? So those are the things you learn real quick.
Yeah.
I see some of you guys laughing because you've done the same thing. After W Company, we were assigned to demolition platoon. If you were pretty smart, you were in regimental headquarters. We were assigned to. If you're pretty smart, you went to intelligence. And if you took code and you went wacky, didn't go wacky, you were in communications. And other than that, they stuck you in demolition, where I ended up. So we had very, very tough training because we were the first parachute regiment to have basic parachute training, 13 weeks. Most of the other outfits later on, they had been in the service, took their basics, so they just went to jump school for 2 weeks, but we had 13 weeks. And most of our cadre were people from West Virginia coal mines, Pennsylvania coal mines, and some of the cadre from Panama, Regional 501. And most of these guys, we knew more about demolitions when we got out of there than the instructors did at Fort Benning when we got down there. We ran the obstacle course. We've done a lot of log lifting as units, and that taught you to be as a team together because no one man can lift that log, but as a unit, we lift it this way and that way, you know. I don't think I can do it today. I'm a little heavier. Hand-to-hand combat, we were always wrestling each other as part of the training. We have a big rope in a circle, and you see who is the last guy that's not thrown out, and he's supposed to win, you know, but that was part of the training. And we had Mount Currahee runs, 3 miles up, 3 miles down, 1,300 feet high every morning. We had people drop, you just run right past them over them. In later years, we found that at least 2 guys died running the mountain, you know. And the only other outfit we had there was, we were more or less a secret area, and we had an MP detachment. And anyone that couldn't make the qualifications, the only place to put them was the MPs. So this is where part of the Dirty Dozen story comes in. On some of the forced marches, we would go along this demolition, and the reason for this is because this is where we wore our fuse cord. And initially, fuse cord is basically 14 inches per minute, burning rate, or 12. So you had to make sure just what that powder train in there was. So we used to cut it off about 3 inches and improvise hand grenades and put it in a stick of dynamite and harass the other guys where we're training them, you know. So you didn't want it to go off in your hand, and you wanted to go off in the air so they couldn't pick it up and throw it back at you. So you made sure it was short. That's the reason I have this. It simulates fuse cord. We had, as I said, the forced marches, and you'll soon become to see some picture a band of brothers that Spielman is going to make. It's some of our fellows that were in I Company, and I had planned to have Bill Granary here, but Bill can't make it tonight. And they marched to a dam, and the dam was at Cornelius, and was an earthen dam. So the water on one side and the top of the dam, and we had, of course, some of you fellows know what infiltrated fire is. You blocked machine guns, and they have to crawl under the machine, live machine gun fire, and they tried to sneak down the side of the dam, but that was a mistake because we had charges all along the dam. And 3 days before, you go to the slaughterhouse and you get all these pig guts and put them on top of the dam so they'd ripen, you know. So this is to simulate what you're going to go through in combat, you know. So these guys say, oh, I don't like this. They go down the dam. Fire number 2. Yeah, they could back up in those pig guts. There weren't no parts of that, you know. But I'm getting out of breath. It all comes back. And part of the training for the medics, they grease a pig and let him go. Say, there's your dinner. You don't catch it, you don't eat. And that was to train them how to butcher a pig, and you know, they were going to be medics, and they're going to see a lot of that stuff. So if you don't catch that pig, you don't eat. So that was part of the training for the medics. Now, the Dirty Dozen exclamation, as I said, the MP detachment, you're laughing, hurry. We have one here that went all through this with me. The MP detachment was guarding, they had live ammunition and everything, because we were like secret things, something similar to what the Dirty Dozen movie was. And a couple of our fellows that my wife and Herbie's wife know, we've met them through the years, managed to get to town, and they got feeling pretty good. First pass, you know how they are. And all the little guys are the troublemakers, you know, and there's one of these little round globes with peanuts in it, so he's putting his money in, no peanuts. Bang, you know, peanuts all over the place. So the proprietor called the MPs, and they try to take these 5 or 6 guys in. No way, as we call them, nothing against the MPs, but we call them rejects. No way were these rejects going to take these guys in. So it took half the MP company to take these guys in and put them in a stockade. So that's part of some of our prisoners. You'll learn more later. How the guys got in the stockade. So we're running the mountain, passing the stockade, and they're giving us the old heel. They're sitting there looking at us, and we're breaking our necks running this mountain, you know. But they were to be court-martialed, and then Captain Hanna, who later was Major Hanna, got them all from court-martial. There's no way, that's the kind of men I want. So that saved Jake and the guys from doing a couple of years in the brig. That was Jake and Shorty Marlin, Majewski, Lip, and Sands. I forget who else was with him. Maybe Irby remembers. And we had something go up on the bulletin board. Fruit carrier pilots wanted. So I said, hey, here's my chance to fly again. So I went down, and some Lieutenant Parsons, he couldn't fly, but I could, but they took him and they didn't take me. Story of my life. Then, I don't know if you've seen some of the papers or not, but our 2nd Battalion commander was Colonel Strayer, a man from Philadelphia. And when we went to go to Benning for our final training, his battalion marched 129 miles in I forget how many hours and set a world record. So regimental headquarters, we went with 3rd Battalion to Colonel Wolverton, and we had to beat him. So the books say about 130-some miles, but it was over cross country and back in Georgia and dirt roads in those days, 156 miles and 70-some hours. And you're really dragging, and we had a lot of fellas fall out, but not too many. And all that distance, if you lay down at night to sleep, you held somebody's arm, because if you got up and walked away, you just left him there. I went off to the side one time, I had something to do, and I got a Trenton, whoop, like a big well just caved in. I almost went down there. If I had, I'd still been there, you know. And they just went off. But then what you had to do is run to catch up, and you're already exhausted. But anyhow, we didn't want to leave our buddies. And when we marched into Fort Benning, everybody's dragging, you know, and the music starts, man, you know, it's like you never went anywhere. You know, that music is unbelievable. It straightens you right up. And the 506 got the nickname of the walkie-talkie, no jumpy 506, because we had wear jump boots before we were qualified, and we dared anybody to take them off. So if your buddy got in a fight, they had to fight you too. You fight him, you got to fight me too, boy. You know, that's the way we were. At Benning, as I said before, we took demolition training, and we knew more than the demolition instructors, because these fellows that taught us, they were what you call powder monkeys from way back when there were kids in the mines, you know, so we were really taught by experts. And then the cadre at Fort Benning, when they get these troops, they run them around the airport, and they really give a rough time. And they want no parts of us, because when they go around, we say, hey, let's go around again, because we already had a lot of training, you know, we could really run. Then during jump training, you went in the mock-up towers. You've seen them in pictures, 200 and some feet tall, you know, and they pull you up, and they say, you ready? And you yell, no, that don't matter. They cut you loose, and down you come. And sometimes that's worse than actually jumping from a plane, because if you have a change of wind, it'll blow you right into the towers, and you're up there hanging, and somebody has to come get you down, you know. I'm talking 200 feet up, all tangled up in a chute, you know. You learn to pack chutes, no talking. You didn't talk. And you double time everywhere you went, no walking. You hear that, Betty? No walking, no talking. It's my wife. And you have to qualify 5 jumps. After your 5th jump, if you didn't jump, you're court-martialed. And you talk about knowing somebody that's tough. We had one fellow, and later on someone here can vouch for this. His name was Salinas. And we got up in that plane, and that kid actually went mad. He stomped around, he foamed at the mouth and everything else. But he said, I would jump from a plane and fight, and I signed, and he did it. And that guy was a nervous wreck, and boy, I give somebody that a lot of credit. They talk about pushing a man out the door, no way. You tear the whole side of that plane out before you can throw anybody out of there. If he didn't want to go, he wasn't going to go. Okay, then we went to the frying pan area. And we had to swim the Chattahoochee, which is a pretty swift river down there between Alabama and Fort Benning. And that's with full pack. So we had one fella, Frenchy Barabird. He's a big fella, his picture's back there. He looked much like John Wayne. And everybody loved old Frenchy. But he was coming back from the pass, and he was late, so he put his head down. And some MP or somebody thought he was, too many drinks, and poked him in the ribs. Well, Frenchy went, wham! Well, that poor guy ended up knocked out across the floor, and the proprietor called the local police, and he ended up in the chain gang. So we're thinking, where's Barbo? He must have been AWOL. So we're all in there, and pretty soon here comes Barbo up the middle of the Company Street in chain gang outfit. He waited till a train came, and he ran right across the front of the train and came back to camp. So Colonel Singh says, let's get the demolition platoon together. We're going into Phoenix City. And he told them, you ever take any of my men again, without letting me know, we're going to blow this place right off the map. And he wasn't kidding either. We had a lot of fellas cut up and everything. They were what you call rolled, you know. Okay, now, I guess we moved to Camp McCall, North Carolina. And we were on maneuvers, and I have a machete back there, and I have it tied in because it's still razor sharp. I didn't want anybody to get hurt with it. But I had a buddy that lived in Mayfair for a long time. He was one of the boys that was what I called worked in the mines in West Virginia, and he met a girl that I had introduced him to and got married. But Vince was my buddy most of the time. And as I said, he lived in Mayfair there. Well, him and I were first scouts, and there was if you know where Bowman's Hill is, there's a big little mountain with buildings up on top. Well, in the area of maneuvers, there was a big barn and a place and a house, you know. It was empty, but anyhow, we cut our way through the brush with the machetes and got to the top. And at that time, we didn't have enough planes to participate in the maneuvers, so we only jumped, some of us only one man to a plane. I jumped one myself. I think Herbie there, he jumped by himself, and my buddy and Joe Leskowitz, who later got killed, jumped one plane. And we managed to capture the enemy's radio chief. And he either had I think it was red or orange armband or blue, so we kept switching anyhow. It didn't make no difference. More like the Dirty Dozen story, you know. And we'd sneak down in a bivouac and take all the rotors or coil wires out of their vehicles and steal one of their vehicles. Before maneuvers were over, we had half the motor pool stole. And they're looking for a whole battalion of paratroopers, but there was only 15 of us. We just dumped a lot of bundles out, you know. So that's another part of the Dirty Dozen story. Oh yeah, and during the maneuvers, a lot of times we ended up living in the swamps for 3 days. And just sleep in the trees because those swamps are full of cottonmouth snakes. Man, I hate them things. So did everybody else. So we had a job, we had General Chapman there, and there was a lake, and he wanted this lake cleared, so I'm looking at Herbie over there. We go in the lake in our shorts, and we had a little parachute patch here. In March, we were turning blue, you know. So we were blowing these stumps, and boom, up goes a stump, and a whole bunch of cottonmouths flying around. These snakes flying all around, you know. So we had one fella that my wife and Elaine met, Jake McNeese, and you look at Jake, and Jake's eyes are like this, like gears. Oh, what's he up to next, you know? So here's a whole battalion of glider troops, double time down the road. And Jake, what are you thinking? So we wait for him to come, we go, boom, a big water spout goes over, and shoots these guys, like pouring buckets of oil on them, you know. If they'd have caught us, they'd have killed us, because only about 8 of us. But those are some of the things we've done. Then we ran the Nazi villages, because we were a demolition platoon, and we put most of all the troops, our line companies, through the Nazi villages. And a little tough. We'd fill up water holes and put dynamite in there, a stick of dynamite, and when the troops would go through, blast the big water spout go up, or throw dirt up around them. And the entrenching shovels were different than back there. They had a T-handle. So we used to take entrenching shovel in the sand, dig down the length of our arm, a stick of dynamite, light it, cover it up real quick and sit on it and ride it up. If it didn't hurt us, we could put the rest of them through there. So that's why I said we were a little goofy, you know. I was going to say something, but I better not. Maybe that's why I got troubles today. But we did, it's a little tough. We had one little fella, he was really a wonderful kid. Joe Oporowski. And Joe was putting a charge on top of the tree. We used to blow the tops of the trees off to simulate mortar fire, you know. Well, Joe got up there and the charge went off in his chest and flew him out of the tree and killed Joe. They landed it, I'll introduce you later, at Herbie's feet. And Herbie was one of the fellows that came down from New England with him. So that was our first casualty. And the following week I got blown up, but I'm still here. Oh yeah, we had, this is funny, but it's not funny. We had 90-day wonders, what we called shave tails, lieutenants just made, you know. And when we go to maneuvers, we have live fire, so they carry a flag, a stick with a flag, you know, and they go on the perimeter and not supposed to go in front of them because you get hit. So we said, oh no, here's this guy with a nice shiny helmet, and he's going over the fence right where the booby trap was. Boom, there goes his flag and his helmet and everything else. He's walking around with a broomstick. But he didn't get hurt, so it was okay. Okay, then we went to, after the maneuvers, another thing that Herbie brought to mind that I had forgot. Again, these shave tails. Some of the fellows said, hey, if we impersonate an officer, we won't be reprimanded, will we? He said, you guys are changing armbands anyway. He said, this is war. So at night we went down, sat in the background, guys bar, the lieutenants, bars, sat in the staff office, you know. When they're all done, he said, "You're all captured." So that's part of capturing the enemy's whole stronghold during maneuvers. So somewhere along the line, related stories has got something to do with whoever made the picture, you know. And then when we were after maneuvers, we went to Fort Bragg, and since we were still on maneuvers, the only thing we were allowed to use in the barracks was the latrines. So we had to still live in those pup tents out until the maneuvers was over. And then finally, maneuvers was over, and we got in the barracks. We knew we were about due to go overseas, so we ended up with a big party. Oh boy. So they got feeling pretty good. They did. So they were throwing, I have to watch myself with a lot of young people here, but everybody was feeling good. And Mike Marquez, one of my buddies, him and his brother, both Mexican Indians, were in a demolition platoon, our demolition platoon, which is a rare thing, two brothers. But anyhow, the Indians can't hold their liquor. So Armando, he was thinking we were going to Japan, and he's cutting all the pillows up with his knife, and there's feathers all over the place, and his brother just steps out of the shower down there, and somebody hits him with a pillow, and he looked like a stuffed turkey. The feathers were sticking all over Mike. And then Jake says, "Throw a bunk down." And the guy started pushing the bunk down the steps. Then all of a sudden, Jake, "Don't do that, don't do that." He's the instigator, he's seen the lieutenant coming. So the lieutenant says, "You guys are clean this place up. If it takes you all night, white glove inspection." So we're throwing water all over the barracks floor to clean up, you know. But it's running down on communications below us. So they got another fight started. So, well, we had a good time. And then we went to Camp Shanks, New York. And George, when we went to Camp Shanks, our train stopped right at the end of Distance Street in Cheltenham, a half hour from home. He lived right up the street with us. And it was killing me. I couldn't get off that train and go home and see the people, you know. Right down the street from where I lived. So we stayed there about a half hour, and we finally got to Camp Shanks and headed overseas. And to the English lady, I'll give you my apologies, but we call that a limey boat. And we got over there, and Tony is here. He'll talk to you later, probably. He was in a 501. It was either 501 or 502, broke a rudder or got hit with a torpedo or something, but they missed us about as far as from here to there. Their ship just veered off. We almost crashed. And they put into, I guess, Halifax, and those poor guys were hunting down it for about 3 or 4 weeks, in and out of the ship. The only thing done was get the run off, till they finally got back to England again, joined up with us. And arriving in Liverpool, then we were assigned to the vicinity of Hungerford rather, and that's between Swindon and Newbury, which was 101st Division headquarters. We were stationed at regimental headquarters in one company of 1st Battalion. That was 1st Battalion Headquarters Company in a manor called Littlecote Manor. Littlecote Castle referred to a lot of times. That was Sir Will's estate, and he was Sir Will's Tobacco. Will's Tobacco, you heard about the English tobacco? Well, that was his. In the additional training there, we used the rifle grenades and the flamethrowers, and just so happened that Colonel Sink had some beautiful trout streams in the back, and trout ponds. So we used to go down there and get forks and bend them out and walk down the trout ponds and gig Sir Will's trout. They were good, but we were hungry, you know. And then they also had a herd of deer on the property, so we managed to get one of the deer, and Captain Matherson then, who later, General Matherson, was our adjutant. He always had to answer everything we'd done to Scotland Yard. So we had a great big tree outside our barracks, and it happened to be hollow, and a hole up top. And we had the deer in the mattress cover inside the tree. So here's Scotland Yard, he's leaning on the tree, and he's asking us all kinds of questions, you know. We're there snickering and snickering because the deer is inside the tree, you know. And then, if you've seen the Normandy documentaries, near the end you see a fellow riding a little half-track waving. Well, that was Vincent Utz, and he lost that arm in the Netherlands. And later on in years, he lived in New Jersey, and Vince was scheduled to be a pro football player. Later on in Jersey, his father-in-law was in a fire, and Vince went to get him out, but Vince never came out, but they saved his father-in-law. So that's the kind of guys we had. The officers, by the way, referred to those fish as goldfish because they had to pay for them. And they paid dearly because they got caught, we didn't. Yeah. And today, I was back with one of my friends, and that whole area is Roman ruins. They're digging that whole area, and beautiful Roman ruins all under where we were trained. It's unbelievable. Well, we continued to train in booby traps, and that castle or manor, there's a room twice the size of this, and all down the walls where the officers lived was armor. And that was Colonel Poppins back in the old days. And something had happened that Colonel Poppin done, and the townspeople came after him, and he galloped away on his horse, and he got killed. And the townspeople said, "You mean to tell me you're sleeping up in there with Colonel Poppin's ghost riding through there?" And they believed that, you know. There weren't no parts you wouldn't find him up there in the dark nohow. So we were a little goofy to those people, you know. And then later years, our first sergeant, we got in the barracks and we're sitting together and we're reminiscing, and I said, "Top, there's a lot of things you didn't know what happened." He says, "I know there's a lot of things you think I didn't know what happened." After that forced march, I got pneumonia. And a fella who was one of Willow Grove's commissioners, Charlie Acker, and another fellow by the name of Charlie Boat from down south, kept feeding me and giving me aspirins. And he said, when I called the roll, Agnew, it came back, "Here!" He said, "I knew that was no darn Yankee." So that was Charlie Boat answering for me. Then, as I said, we went and improvised everything we used. We used the regular ones. We improvised buoy traps and fuse lighters and everything. And we, up in the hills, one squad would go up and lay booby traps. Another one would go up in the dark and deactivate them. We had one fellow, Charlie Bowles. He set one off with a blank cartridge on it and lost his eye. So we hadn't seen Charlie since then. Then it came pretty near time to go into Normandy. We had two officers, and the British has an officer, he has to have a batman, which is an orderly. So I ended up as an orderly to Lieutenant Mellon, who was our lieutenant at that time, and I had the opportunity to train with the British paratroops. And I went through all their training, and I was amazed, some of these old guys up there, and they were in Africa and got wounded. Here they are taking their whole training right from the start all over again. So, and some of those British paratroopers, they're tough. There are a lot of these little Welsh coal miners. Boy, they're mean son of a gun. So Ray Calandrera, Lieutenant Mellon, and Lieutenant McMillian and I went and trained with the British. And one of the things we do, you crawl out through a big hole into a lake. There's a great big cable, and you go under that cable to the end of the lake. Well, McMillan was a big guy, and Mellon, my lieutenant, was a little guy. So McMillan's going like this for the cable, and I'm going like this for the cable, and Mellon in the middle is going like this, so he's going over spitting water all the time, you know. He never caught on. But the poor guy, he got killed in Normandy. Then I didn't smoke. And I didn't drink like, well, not like those guys, you know, but some of those guys were wicked. And I didn't play cards because I didn't know how. So I was sitting around, I volunteered for dispatch rider, so I was regimental dispatch rider with 2 other fellows. And I rode around from division headquarters and dropped the dispatches off at the particular battalion headquarters. And I come out from 3rd Battalion one time, my motorcycle's gone. And you never know what you're carrying, so I carried the saddlebags with me. Here comes this lieutenant around the corner, boom, boom, boom. I said, sir, you stole the regimental dispatch motorcycle. We could have both been court-martialed. Me for letting him get it and him taking it. So, not long after that, we get a new lieutenant in demolition platoon. He looks at me and says, I know you're from somewhere. I said, yeah, you better know me. I'm the guy's motorcycle you stole. He said, you don't say nothing, neither will I. So him and I become great friends. You'll see back there original pictures of the Dirty Dozen, and then you'll see pictures that were put in a magazine. And if you look at the pictures of the actual fellows, you can pick them out in there. And I'm the guy fooling around like this because I jumped in 03. I was a junior in the NRA, and I didn't want nothing to do with that newfangled gadget, the M1, so I jumped in 03. And I had my own 45, which was a black holster. I'm probably the only one ETO, so I took my own 45 and my own holster. I didn't get like the idea of sleeping in a sack and somebody comes stick a bayonet in you. I had it sitting right here all the time. So when I jumped in Normandy, the O3 hit the ground and then it knocked my shoulder out, but shut up. Knocked my shoulder out, but it went back in, but it's all right. But I'm going to demonstrate something that a lot of people aren't aware of. Hand me both of those. From being a marksmanship instructor, you never handle a closed weapon. So we always put a flag in it like that. That blocks, you know it's safe. Now this is a carbine, and the carbine, it's very hard to get the bolt to stay back because it's only a short pin here. But this is the type folding stock that the airborne jumped with. And they had a pouch that usually from this side, from here down. And they're very rare. One of the fellows in the gun club lent this to me for the demonstration. And you always point the weapon away from the audience. Never point any weapon, loaded or not, towards anybody. This is known as a Griswold bag. When you jump, this was locked onto your harness. And in that Griswold bag, this is a stock. This is the barrel action. That's what you had to do before you could shoot back at the enemy. We lost a lot of men. So when they went into the Netherlands, a lot of the people jumped the M1 in one piece, as I did with the 03. I've seen fellas hit so hard that they bent the barrel in that M1, because you have a tremendous amount of equipment on you. Besides us with a load of explosives still. Usually we had a musette bag that we had reversed like that mannequin. And on one side, our riggers altered it, one side a little pouch, and that pouch is a wooden block with blasting caps in it. And the other pocket was fuse cord, basically like this color, and a crimper. And when you crimp that blasting cap, you always held it away from yourself, away from your face, in case it went off, over towards the other guy, you know. That's how you learn who your buddy was. But that's some of the situations that some of the fellows were in. They didn't have a chance. Couldn't shoot back.
What was the total weight of everything? Did you carry dynamite with you when you jumped in Normandy?
Half a case of TNT.
So what, you had your first shoot, your secondary shoot, all this stuff plus the dynamite. What did it weigh?
It was heavier than what I was. I was 157 pounds in. So we had an M1. You can pick this up if you want. It's over 8 pounds. You had musette bag, half a case of TNT. You had your Cracker Jacks rations, which looks like a Cracker Jack box. Probably in your side pockets, about 3 days of that. That was K rations. And they weren't too good either. But you had your helmet. There's a helmet back there, a jump helmet, but I don't have a chin strap. You had that canteen, and it wasn't hanging like that. It was full of water. You knew what a quart of water weighs. A canteen cup. Then under your musette bag, you had basically a roll of primer cord, and that detonation velocity, that was 1,950 to 1,975 feet per second. You had your reserve chute, you had your back chute, you had all your webbing equipment, and a raincoat, and that's about all you had, But you were heavier. You couldn't get in that plane yourself. I would like to have all this stuff here and put on a young guy and tell him to try and get up on that table. You wouldn't do it. You had to get pushed into that plane and probably a crew chief pulling you. So when you went out a door, when it jumped out the door, you didn't have to worry where you were going. But a lot of the training jumps, you jump and you make a half turn and the prop blast hits you in the back. And if you don't hold your head down and you make a shoot loose, the turnbuckle will come up here and crack you behind the head. But anyhow, when you go out like this. But when you're loaded for combat, you go out like this. Unbelievable the weight we had on us.
What was the minimum altitude you could be jumping from your shoot over with all that weight?
Well, in combat, about 500 or 600. But during maneuvers, they tried us at 300. When our chutes opened, our feet were in the tops of the trees. And every jump, we lost about almost 1/4 of the men. So we lost a lot of good men before we even got near combat. And we have a couple paratroopers here. Sam Porter was a 501, and 503 went in the Pacific, and Tony was in a 501. And I hope I have time for them to come up and say a few words too. Along with that, you had an entrenching tool or a pickmatic. And when you get into a place like Bastogne, everybody wanted a pickmatic because that's the only thing that would go through any ground other than blowing a hole up to make a foxhole, And the pickmatic is a short. Do you have a pickmatic back there? Well, you can't turn around anyway. It's a short pick with a short handle. Just the handle's a good club, and the pickmatic will go through a helmet. So actually, it was a good defense weapon, too. Bless you. And again, you'll see a lot of the stuff in demonstration back there and also the pictures. The Stars and Stripes came out and they wrote the story about the Filthy 13 and the Dirty Dozen. And in that particular copy of that particular article, you'll see I had underlined where they said the Dirty Dozen then became the Filthy 13. So. And they said that's because the lieutenant could whip us. Well, he's not a little guy. He couldn't have whipped any one of us. But that's the way the story goes. Along with the entrenching table, we had a T5 case. You see that hanging on my belt there. That was a pair of pliers and a knife for using, making your charges up. And a combat knife of one way or another. I didn't like the one we had, so on my foot in that picture, you'll see it's a little different top. It's not square, it's round. And I bought that in England because I like the Sheffield steel. And it was double bladed. It was a nice knife. Also, a young lady from the press was asking me if we had a musket with us all the time. No, we had a canteen cup. And you cooked in it, you ate in it, you shaved in it. That was it, that canteen cup that's inside the case there. And we also had the wire cutters that are demonstrated there, and I brought a pair. When you get into combat, most of the barbed wire they had strung out has also got tin cans on it with a lot of stones in there. So if you cut that without holding that wire and it dropped and it made a lot of noise, you expect a lot of mortar fire coming in. So if you find someone that doesn't know how to use that, you take it away from him because he'll just get a lot of guys killed. You know, they don't know what they're doing. We had some replacements come in and we wondered if we could trust these people because they didn't train with us. You know, here's a guy, we don't know this guy and he's one of our corporals because one of our guys was already killed, so he's a replacement. Also, let's see where I'm at here. When we went into Normandy, we left from England, and my one buddy, when I came back from the train with the British, I says, "Where's Strout?" He says, "He's in the hospital." Well, they had made a night jump, and we lost a lot of guys in that night jump. He had broke his leg in 4 places. So I went to see him, and I said, "Where's he at?" He says, "He's on crutches. He went out there with his redhead girlfriend." I said, "What do you mean he went out? How'd he get over the fence?" He says, "You know, Vince, he dug a hole and went under it." So that's the kind of guys we had. The 1st Division came in Omaha, the 4th in Utah, the 29th in Omaha, the 90th came in Utah, and the 82nd was to drop in St. Mary Glees. The 101st was to hit the area of Carentan. The British powers and commandos at Bonneville and Caen, and the glider pilots and troop carriers were to come in later. That was basically the expected landings in Normandy. I have to break down on what General Eisenhower and Montgomery was charged with, but you probably know that. When we left England, we hit over the Isles of Guernsey, and we made a turn. And there was also a submarine there with lights as a guiding light as we made our turn into Normandy. And first thing you know, we got to what's known as stand up and hook up. So when you get over enemy territory, you don't want to be sitting on those metal seats because you might get hit in the wrong place. So a lot of fellas sat on their helmets, you know. So you usually stand up and hook up because you have less chance of getting hit when there's shrapnel and small arms fire. You're coming in low enough for everybody with a pistol shooting at, you know. It's not like 30,000 feet in the air. And they were supposed to fly a particular line of flight, make a curve, and go out. And all the line companies, that's rifle companies and mortar companies and machine gun companies, we were demolition, and we had an objective to go to, so we had compass courses. We knew where we were going. But these people were supposed to look up at the line of flight and determine how to assemble with their units. Well, those planes were just going like this. They were getting out of there. And you're supposed to mush a plane and lift the tail so that when we go out, you don't shoot, don't get tangled in the back of the plane. But they just got out of there. It was their first combat too, so, but that's no excuse. They didn't do it again. I'll tell you more later. When I landed, I landed right outside of St. Côme de Mont, and I was about the middle of the stick. And when I landed, he made me a little model back there of a paratrooper. And here's a wall, and that's just about where I landed. There was a hedge right behind me. And the first man I ran into, he had a mortar jacket. He was whimpering and crying and everything, and I threatened to shoot him. I said, "You keep that up, man, I'll shoot you right now." Because he'd give a lot away and a lot of people killed. It's hard to say, but that's the way it was in those days. So later I found he was more afraid of me and the enemy, so he surrendered. So, but anyhow, the next man I met was my buddy Mike Marquez, Mexican Indian. And where's it at? When you do this, that was a cricket. And if you got two back, you have a German Mauser here, Wayne? Answer me. Answer me with that Mauser. Slam it. You hear that? Okay, that was a mistake. Because some of the guys got answered by the German loading his rifle. Sounded just like the cricket. So after a while, this was out of business. We learned not to use that again. And you would make a cricket, and you get an answer. And the cosign was Flash Gordon. So Mike says, "Is that you, New Ag?" I said, "That's me, Mike." So Mike was the first one I met. So we managed to get together, and they told us that the irrigation ditches were 12 feet wide and 2 feet deep. Well, Mike stepped in it, and there went Mike, right to the bottom. So when I pulled him out, he hadn't put his trigger housing in right, and he lost his trigger housing. So just throw it away, it's no good. So I gave him my 03 to use, and I used my 45 till we met up with our other men. And we finally got one fellow, Ware, Florida, and Jake McNeese. And we proceeded to go from Angerville Plain down to the Dow River bridges. That was our objective. And met a colonel, and he was going to the other big bridge, much the same bridge you see in Private Ryan. And there's a picture of that real bridge back there. And Private Ryan was on the one bridge, and we were on the other bridge. But if you've seen the picture, our planes came in and bombed the Germans. Well, our planes came in and bombed us because they didn't know we took the bridges. So we had no communication. We were cut off. But anyhow, on the way down, the first thing we done, we found a manhole. We blew up the telephone lines. And the next thing, we blew up the power lines. Well, that was fun. It was sparks all over, you know. But then you got out of there quick because they start throwing mortar shells. And the ground was real flat all the way to the Dow River. And the Dow River is much like the Netherlands. They're built up like a dike, and the river's over here. So behind us was just like sticking your head up like this. But behind them was all weeds and everything. So we were pinned down pretty much, and well, I'll tell you anyway. I said to Jake, I said, "Look at that crazy Indian. He'd stick his rifle up, and then he'd pull his head up." So I reminded Jake about this a few years back, and Betty didn't know this, my wife, till he told her, "Hey, you talking about Mike?" We had a sniper picked off about 16 guys, and I told you I was a junior in NRA, so I could really shoot. And only two of us had the 03s, the two best shots in the company, and I guess I was one of them. But anyhow, I looked at the impact, I found out where it was coming from, so I missed him the first time, but then the second time when he came up, I got him. And I was so overjoyed at getting that guy, I jumped up on top of the dike and I get the crouch all kind of heck, and Jake grabbed my legs and pulled me down, and the machine gun, you know. So I guess I've been seeing Gunga Din or something, you know. But anyhow, I forgot about that, and Jake told me, you know. My wife learned a lot of things she didn't know when we finally got together. On the way down there, Ware got hit. And he just found, if you ever when I was a kid, I used to go over to the dump and shoot rats. I exterminated about 150 rats a year as a kid learning to shoot, you know. Well, you hit a rat, it just bounces like that. Where is just bouncing around on that ground like it got hit right through the shoulder. But we couldn't stop. We had to leave him for the medics, so we had to get to the bridge. So the bridge comes up like an elevated road, country road, and it was like a wagon road, and there was a big wooden bridge we were on where vehicles could come over. So we knew somebody was on the other side, and we had no medic. So I got permission from Captain Shettle to get all the explosive I could and blow the roadbed out so we could dig it out and crawl back and forth, which it worked. So that's one of the things I'll take credit for. Then when the planes come in and start strafing us, our own planes, and bombing us, because like I said, they didn't know if we were the enemy or we had taken the bridge or not. So we blew the ridge because, like the TV said, we didn't know if a Panzer division was coming up, it was going to overrun us and get to the beaches and push all those guys back in the water. See, that's our purpose. So after that, another funny things that aren't funny. When we used to be on maneuvers, Mike had a hard time seeing. You know, any fellow that's a hunter, and you go along, you see a hunting sign, after a while you can read it pretty well in the dark, you know. But Mike couldn't see in the dark. So Jake and I wanted to go see what happened to where, and we gave Mike a whole bunch of German prisoners. Well, he was a fierce-looking Mexican, and you don't know how to fool with this guy. So he's taking them back. He lost his way, so he had to ask the prisoners which way to go. I have a tape of this. It's really a riot. But it's funny and it's not funny. But I don't think they wanted to fool with Mike. And he expressed that in his tape. He says, no way, hey, Ag, no way in the world was I going to be captured. You know, I'd take 10 of them before they get me. And he meant it, too. And I think they knew it. And a lot of people don't realize that most of the, not most, but a lot of the troops we were fighting in Normandy were Russian. They were Ukrainian. They were not communists, so they sided with the Nazis. And we were fighting Ukrainian troops in Russia. And a lot of them were Cossacks, so we ended up with a 506 cavalry. A lot of our guys were from out west, so we got these Ukrainian horses, and we were riding horses all around, and they had top hats and all kinds of weird things, riding around with anything they could find. Then we recouped, and we marched towards Carentan. In other words, we came back and assembled as our unit. We marched in Carentan, and you can't imagine to go down a roadbed, up the road and up into an apple orchard. We went in there about 2 minutes, and we got pinned down. And you see how big that canteen is back there? Well, I had it here, and we just starting to dig a hole, and the leaves started flying off, and the bandolier cut off my chest, and I took that canteen out, and I think I went down 3 feet. I really displaced the room that canteen was taking up. So one of the fellows finally circled around and got the machine gun that had us pinned down. But we lost another man right there, a little Hale. And one fellow happened to be in a foxhole with me, and like I flew, so I knew airplanes pretty well. And Herbie says, hey, there's a plane. I said, get, you know what part down? I said, that's a Kraut. He come in, strafing, you know. So somebody can vouch for that later on. But that's the kind of things we done. And then they had some patrols go out, and a fellow from Gloucester, New Jersey, Bill Shanklin, him and I went down because we heard that German tank commanders had Lugers. We wanted a Luger. So S2 said, you want to send some demolition men out with intelligence for a reconnaissance patrol. And they said, Agnew and Shanklin's been down there before, so we were the goats. So we went in and reported, and he says, I want you to go to past 1st Battalion, past 2nd Battalion, around by 3rd. But we were going around, we got pinned down. And when the guy, Corporal Simpson, went in to report to the captain, he said, I just wanted to know if they were still there. Well, that captain died in the Netherlands, and I don't think the enemy got him. And on the way back from Normandy as a dispatch rider, I was given the job of taking a bike and riding all over to Cherbourg and laying the map out, and then coming back and guiding the regiment back the next day. So I got to a crossroad, and I wasn't sure, because the German patrols were changing all the signs, you know. So the one officer says, I'll take over. And I said, okay, you know. So he took over and went the wrong way. And that night, we were in this bivouac area. He had gathered, the same captain, had gathered all these explosives to take back for training, and that truck blew up and killed 6 men after all that. So after that, we got on an LST and went back to what we call Limey Land. My young lady friend from England's laughing back there. And the purpose of that was recoup our losses and get ready for the next one. And the next one, of course, was Bridge Too Far in the Netherlands. When we got ready to go in the Netherlands, as I said before, the planes in Normandy were all over the place, not so in the Netherlands. So going to a Pathfinder reunion at one time later, they said, we flew pretty good going in to the Netherlands. I said, you know why, don't you? Because some of the guys said, if you do it again, we're going to leave live hand grenades and go out the door. And they weren't fooling. They weren't fooling. And on some missions, like Pathfinder missions, it's hard to say, but the last man's orders were, if anybody freezes in the door, shoot him and go out over him. That's our own men, because if they split the stick and you lose a mission, 1,000 men may die. So it's a tough thing to take, but that's the way it was. So at Market Garden, we jumped into the Netherlands on September 17th, and we didn't leave there for 72 days. Our mission was to jump in Zaan, go from Zaan over the Wilmington Canal and seize the bridges on the Dommel River in the Netherlands, and the British was coming up from the south. But I'm going to catch heck. They stopped and made tea. They were 2 days late. No, I'm not kidding, man. Well, our losses out of the division is probably more than that's counting killed in action, wounded in action, and missing in action. 3,500. Okay? So our regiment, before we got out of the war, had a 400% turnover. Every single man was replaced 4 times. So, let's see. Yeah, we got into Eindhoven, and some pictures back there. Herbie had an experience. On the 19th, we were bombed. And that's where one of my buddies, Jim Davison, got killed. And Sergeant Myers, who came in from the Rangers late, and the plane came in and strafed him, and I picked Jim up, and my fingers went right in his head. He was gone. So we got Myers down into a little air raid shelter, and a little Dutch boy sitting there with a baby in his arms, and all of a sudden he fell over, and I grabbed the baby, and there's a picture of the baby there I took to Mr. Boosters, and they have it on there. And then they also had a incendiary bomb come down the side of the house and go in their window into the cellar. Well, I chased them all out, and I went in and I got the incendiary on a root tray, like you grow seeds in, and I carried that out and threw it in the river. The next day, Mr. Booster came with a little tray, and that card that's back there, and I didn't know for years until I had an interpreter, it said, "Thank you for saving my house in the bombing of Eindhoven." And when we went back for the 40th, I had hoped to see him, but he had just passed away. But when I went back with Herbie for the 50th, his daughter showed up. And I said, "How old were you then?" He said, 20. I said, "Where was he hiding you?" You know? I'll get in trouble yet. but that's the way it was. We finally, I'm still in the Netherlands. I'm getting the Bastogne here. I got to watch the time. After we left, the whole road from Eindhoven to Nijmegen had to be held. And as I told you before, there'll be a series coming out of Band of Brothers. That company plus regimental headquarters demolition team kept that whole 26 miles open. Every little culvert or every little bridge, there was maybe 2 of us. And we were holding that in case the Germans come out of the woods. And they were all along the perimeter and the sides. And you could see all the way along. And I was a little partial to what happened there, but about every 100 yards you see a British dispatch rider motorcycle killed. And I said, hey man, that was my job, you know. And I went through the woods. I didn't go up no road, you know. But anyhow, we had to hold that whole area open till we advanced up to Nijmegen. And a lot of mistakes were made there because we had no communication with the 82nd that jumped above us and the British above us there. And then the Polish brigade had jumped in there also. So until we got up there, we had no contact with those people. So I, again, no motorcycle, but I was a runner. I had a job of running back and forth. And I came back one time and, one story I won't tell, get somebody in trouble. But anyhow, come back and I got in this hole. And it was a deep foxhole, whoever dug it, thank the Lord. But I never had an artillery barrage like that in my life. I come out of there, I didn't think I was going to find anybody alive. There wasn't any pig or cow within 100 yards alive around there. And that's another thing in Normandy, you know. You're digging in a foxhole, you hear this boom, 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 boom. What the heck's that, you know? I don't know what kind of vehicle. A big dray horse with feet like this galloping down the road, you know, right over you in the foxhole, you know. And they weren't light, they were big. And the other thing is, it's a shame to see all the cattle because they were all shot, you know, and cattle laying there a while. They looked like a balloon or blowing out, their feet sticking way up, you know. And, well, when we got back to the Netherlands again, when we got into Eindhoven from Nijmegen, we went on what was known the island. Now, the island was the Nieder and the Wall River, which was actually the Rhine River, the upper part of the Rhine River. And we were to hold that, and we were, our demolition platoon again, we were way out on the end of a little town of Zetten. A little old thatched farmhouse, and then, I guess 500-600 yards up to the dike, and digging inside, you had an outpost. Okay, the outpost had wires running, you had communication. But on either side of that, you had listening posts, about 200 yards out. And you went out there at night, you got in that hole, and I never realized till we went on our 50th and got on that boat and went up the Rhine, how high the ground was that the Germans were holding in Arnhem. But you didn't stick your head up, and you didn't move until you were relieved. And a lot of people don't realize you might be in that hole with one of your buddies that's been dead for 2 days. And you can't get him out of there, even at night. So the next guy got out, he's got to get in the same hole with that guy. Take his turn, see? And you're in there and you hear, what the heck's that? It's the pigs eating a dead body. So for a long time, we just ate a pig before that. We killed one of the farmer's pigs. But for a long time, man, I wanted nothing to do with those grunters, you know. But all you done was listen to hear if there's any motion across the river with a Panzer division or anything moving. And then the British got locked in Arnhem, and Colonel Strayer, a man from Philadelphia, his battalion, they shot 20-millimeter tracers across the river. And where that arch was, that was where they were to meet our men in the boat to bring them back. So they come back and they went back to England, the men from Arnhem. But they had some supply drops, and some fellows take a chance, run out under fire and bring them in. And this is mine. That's my beret. It's American, British, and Pathfinders. The supply canister was full of hats. Hard to take, but that's, who needed that, you know? And we've been there a while, and of course we found a cow, and it had been hit through the udder, you know, and you know, if you farmers, if you don't keep a cow going, she'll cake up. Well, we massaged this cow, and we had this cow going, man, we had milk. Until Jake says, hey, somebody stole our cow. And my wife's laughing, and Elaine, because they know Jake. And he's from Oklahoma. Somebody rustled our cow, let's go get him. Well, it was a farmer came back looking for his cow, so we gave it to him, you know. And he was so tickled that it hadn't damaged the cow, you know. He really saved the cow's life by taking care of it. And when we went back for the 50th anniversary, those Dutch people are wonderful. The little children, our host, Harvey and I had the host, and he was a teacher, and he said, would you come speak to my class? And we had a bus trip we had to go to. Those kids were in that classroom waiting for us at 7 in the morning. Wonderful little kids. And I have one picture there, my little Dutch girlfriend, little gold-rimmed glasses, beautiful little child. And her mother's let her sit on my lap and get my picture taken, you know. But
15 minutes, I think. Because we're going to
how many?
15, 20 minutes.
Okay, because I've got to get the Baston yet. Okay, so the Dutch people are wonderful. When we went there, that whole 26 miles from mine home to mine, Megan, was lined with people. I don't know where they came from, but they were there to greet us. And what really takes to heart, 3 old guys, they couldn't walk, and the canals, oh, as long as the eye can see, these 3 old guys got there in a rowboat. They couldn't walk, but they rowed, and the American flag in a 12-foot boat was about 20 feet high. So we all had tears when we seen that in our eyes, you know. They're ever going to get there one way or the other. But the people are wonderful, really. And anytime you go with this on your shoulder, you go any house in the Netherlands, you got a place to stay. Okay, now my wife just signaled me back down. Okay. After the Netherlands, we withdrew to a place called Marmelon, France. And at that time, the Pathfinders were having a little problem because we're hitting a lot of minefields. So they wanted demolition men to volunteer for the Pathfinders. So it just so happened that this lieutenant I was telling you about with a motorcycle, Jake and I, when Willie died, I told his wife that when Schreiber volunteered, that was his name, Lieutenant Williams, Jake and I volunteered, but it was the other way around. When Jake and I and Majewski and Code and, well, 5 of us anyway, went into the Pathfinders. Willie was our Pathfinder officer. And he was our lieutenant, and he stayed in. He ended up as a full colonel, head of all the Pathfinders all the way into Vietnam. So when we get together, and Betty didn't go with me, Willie and I shared the room together, and we had old times, you know, but we talked a lot about things. But anyhow, we volunteered for the Pathfinders, and we went to Limey Land again to do some further training and experimenting jumps and different equipment. And while we were there, the Battle of the Bulge started. Hitler started pushing into the Bulge area. So it just so happened the 506 team, Pathfinder team, was the picture of back there, was the only ones available. So we were alerted on the 22nd and got all our equipment, we're ready to go. I didn't think we were in the air. And the mission was aborted. Of course, we wanted to go, hey, our buddies are in trouble, you know. But anyhow, when the mission was aborted, we landed, we left someone to guard all the equipment, we went back, and this is how critical things were. We drew extra smoke. But in the briefing room, in the meantime, one of the lieutenants goes to town, he gets in an automobile accident, broken legs, you're not going to operate on him unless somebody's standing there right there so that he don't say anything. We realized we needed more smoke, so the supply sergeant in the air group, he comes over with a couple cases of smoke and walks into our briefing, grab him, missing in action. We locked him up. And the captain was saying, "Where's my supply sergeant?" Well, we had him locked up because he walked right in on the briefing, you know. But those are the way things were at that time. And we were all sworn to secrecy for years and years. My wife never knew I was in the Pathfinder, so Jake told her, or what our missions were, up until the Release of Information Act about 10 years ago. So anyhow, we took off on the 23rd, and we headed for Bastogne to the encircled troops. And at first, they were going to take one plane, and they decided, well, if we lose that plane, we're in trouble. So it was two of it. We had 2 plane loads, and I don't know if they draw straws or cut cards or what, but anyhow, Willie and us, we were the first plane to go. And Frenchie Blaine, his picture's back there. He was original Pathfinder. A little story about that about time. That went into Normandy. And one of the planes, the Normandy Pathfinder planes, was shot down and went into the channel. So he was in the other plane that finally got into Normandy. But anyhow, Blaine's job was, if he seen it was safe, he was to throw the smoke out, and then the other plane could dump out in the Bastogne. So we got both planes on the ground. But on the way in, we got a lot of ground flak and whatnot, but you look out and see what's going on, you know, and you're looking right down the muzzle of a big gun, ready to blow us right out of the air. So Colonel Crouch, he didn't remember until the Pathfinder in reunion. I reminded him, I said, "Don't you remember how you saved that flight?" He said, "No." He dove the plane right at them, so they thought they were going to crash on him. So they all jumped out of the emplacement. And when he pulled up, of course, we're loaded down, all our knees, oh man, we went down, and we could, you're hooked on a cable, you know, you're standing up. We managed to get back up just in time. We up and leveled off, and out the door we went. So we got into Bastogne, and we got in a corrugated place, and they must have seen us coming in because everybody was in foxholes. We went where everybody was. They were, you know, under the ground and all. And they blew that off the top of our head. Then we got in the bottom of a chateau. There was a big old furnace in there, and a couple of planes came in and strafed us and bombing us. One guy got in the furnace. We had a job getting him back out again. But some of the comical things. And when they hit, my one buddy, well, plain language, he had to go to the bathroom. And every time he'd run out, a plane would come in. So he'd yank his pants up and run back in. Then he'd run out again. And I says, "I'll go out with you, Dewey, and keep my eye on the plane." In the meantime, they had hit pretty hard, and all the smoke, case of smoke, busted open, and all the guys were underneath this cellar choking. And there was bars in the window, they couldn't get out. So I got a gas mask out the back of a truck. You know, you fellas know what a truck is, a little gate in the back. Usually a tow cable or something there, with his gas mask in there. And I went in and helped get them out. But it was frozen. It didn't close on my face, so I got a lot of the smoke too. And then we set up the highest point we could find. They had been building houses, and it was this brick pile that they never finished. But that was the highest point in Bastogne. So we decided that we're going to put our Eureka set on top of the brick pile, and that's the initial set. And when you listen to the headset on that set for the planes coming in, then you turn the CRN-4 on. And the CRN-4 has a telescopic antenna with guy wires. And you pull tapes out the bottom, look like steel tapes. It's counterpoise, and that's your ground field for that antenna. But the Krauts can triangulate on that real quick. So you don't turn that on till the last minute. So I'm the guy in the brick pile. I said, "What are you doing? How did you get up there?" I said, "Because I was probably the dumbest one, you know." But you had to make a decision, you had to do it. So they had to boost me up there, and I heard the first planes coming in and told them to turn the CRN-4 on. So that was the 23rd. And I have listings here of what we dropped and how many supplies come in, how many gliders come in. But at this time of the year especially, on the 25th, that was the biggest Christmas present that any U.S. troops ever got, manna from heaven, just like they called me Moses. But that's what happened to the Bastogne resupply. And Patton didn't get there the 26th. So really all the 101st needed was supplies, medical supplies, pardon me, ammunition and whatnot. I'm running out of voice. Pardon me. So that's the story of the Dirty Dozen, how we came about, believe it or not. Do I have time to call a few fellows up here?
Yeah, give them, just don't let them talk as long as you do.
Sam Porter, would you come up here? 503rd, stand up. 503rd Parachute Infantry in the Pacific. Corregidor.
You might tell them that his is on tape upstairs.
Yeah, Herbie's was here and tried to get me to come out a long time ago. I said, oh, that's not my bag. But then my wife said, you've got to get up there and tell your story. Tony, where are you at? Get up, man. Tony was a 501, 101st Airborne, 3 paratroop regiments, was a 501, 502, and 506. Tony was with a 501. Oh. Okay. You like to add anything, Tony?
The average guy weighed at least 300 pounds. You couldn't get in the airplane by yourself.
There's a picture on the wall there, isn't there?
We carried the M1 and it was a blue spot. And it was all across our chest. A lot of guys got broken bones. But just to give you an idea, when we went into Normandy, we loaded the plane about 10 o'clock. We drove around for 2 hours, and we got information. The information was at least 300 miles long. When we got over the channel, the planes flew 9, and they were all stacked, 9 in formation. The distance was 100 feet, wing to wing. These pilots were fairly new. That's what happened. Yeah. When we made the turn, like he had mentioned, they didn't know. As soon as we hit France, we had clouds. We hit the clouds, and everybody's in the word. But the main thing was the anti-aircraft and the firecracker, just like when you hold a spark gun. That's exactly what I'm hoping. And it's amazing how the planes and the guys got down. We were supposed to come, we got 300 feet, but I think we were coming up.
Okay, I'd like to tell you about another story. When we went into Bastogne, we had one of our young fellows that the first sergeant says, Herbie, get off that truck. And he put him in charge of supply and put Sergeant Anderson on the truck. And Herbie never knew why, but the 3 young fellows that he came down from New England with were gone. And Top Kick was a wonderful man, so he didn't want Herbie to be the last of the one. Herbie, would you stand up? That's one of the other Dirty Dozen. You don't see Herbie's picture there because our section was 1st Battalion Section, Regimental Headquarters Demolition Platoon. Herbie was in either 2nd or 3rd Battalion Section, which job was to guard Colonel Sheik in the headquarters. So he had a mission, his half of our group, there were really about 19, and everybody that came into our barracks, Filthy 13 barracks, said he was in the Filthy 13, but not so. Most of them were fellas original from Toccoa way back, and you could really depend on them. And as I said to Jake when we first got together, I said, you know, Jake, my brother went in and enlisted. I didn't see him for almost 20 years.
Wow.
See, these are my brothers. So they really were. And you have to fight any one of those guys, you got to fight me. Now that's, you didn't know that, did you, George? George Gallagher and I were kids together in Burholm. And we used to take care of all the trees in Old Trinity Oxford Cemetery.
I'd like to have this continue, but we've got a big job to get things all packed up and out by 9 o'clock, or else we're locked in for the night. So one thing I didn't do at the beginning, I've got the flag up here, and I've tried to make a point to start with a